Well, the only thing better than being 1-0 is being 2-0, and that's where Pitt is right now after a 45-17 win over Central Michigan at Acrisure Stadium on Saturday. The Panthers got to 2-0 by blowing out the Chippewas. I think Chippewas is the plural. I don't know if it's Chippewa, but it doesn't matter now because Central Michigan is in the past. Pitt is moving on to West Virginia, and we'll certainly have a lot to talk about with the backyard brawl this week. Maybe try and line up some special guests. I don't know. We'll see if we can actually pull that off or not. But we're definitely going to have a lot to talk about heading into Pitt, West Virginia, particularly after the Mountaineers lost at Ohio. Anybody who was around watching Pitt 20 years ago knows what it's like to lose at Ohio. I don't know if they had the Thundersticks out for that game in Athens on Saturday, but nevertheless, we will have lots of time this week to talk about Pitt, West Virginia. Today, it's Monday. That means it's time for our Monday thoughts on Saturday's game, and in this case, Monday thoughts on Saturday's win. What do we think about Pitt's 28-point win over Central Michigan, 4-touchdown victory at Acrisure Stadium to get to 2-0? I got a lot of thoughts. Got a lot of thoughts on offense, got a lot of thoughts on defense, got a lot, even some thoughts on special teams. So, lots to talk about. Let's jump into it. The Monday Thoughts episode of the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Monday here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You know what we do every week on Mondays? We just kind of talk about the game. We had the post-game show, of course, on Saturday night. That was a lot of fun. Hopefully you were able to tune in for that. We had a lot of people join us and talk about Pitt Central Michigan a few hours after it ended. We'll have another post-game show this Saturday. As soon as Pitt West Virginia ends, or a few minutes later, as long as it takes me to get things all ready to go here in mission control, we will be live with the post-game show right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Who knows, that game's a 3:30 kickoff, so probably end around 7:30, somewhere around there. We will be live for an hour or more if we need to. We'll have our, backshore apparel shot of the game. We'll have lots of conversation and discussion breaking down Pitt, West Virginia on Saturday. So, look, this is the place to be for the post-game shows. We have a lot of fun doing it, and hopefully you can join us. If you're worried, because it's sort of inconsistent on when we start, obviously our weekly live show starts every Wednesday night at 8:30. If you're worried about missing, the post-game show, you don't know when we're going to start or whatever, subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications, and you get an alert sent to you and let you know, hey, Panther-Lair is live right now. Tune in. You don't want to miss this conversation. And so do that. Like this video and subscribe. We would really appreciate it. And then don't forget to check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. So last week after the win over Duquesne, 61-9. We took, I said, you can look at it like big picture. It's a 50-point blowout win. It was exactly what you needed. You beat the FCS opponent, and there's no, there was no doubt about it, as the man says. And then I said, as you drill in, you get a little bit closer, you look at some of the details, you start getting a little bit concerned about some things. Ooh, why was this? Or why was that? Why didn't they do this better? Why didn't they do that better? Why didn't they dominate Duquesne more in this area? Why weren't they able to run the ball at will? I think that was probably the biggest question coming out of that Duquesne win. And to be honest, I don't think anything was really answered or solved or, in any way that would make you feel better in the Central Michigan game. Pitt finished with 26 rushing attempts for 124 yards, which is an average of 4.8 yards per carry. Not bad. Pitt's never going to be a run-heavy team. They're not going to be a run-focused team, so you're not expecting them, even against a group of 5 opponent or somebody where they have a significant matchup advantage. You're never really going to expect them to go out and rush for 200 yards or 250 yards. That wouldn't be my expectation. I doubt that we'll see that, but we didn't see it against Duquesne, and we didn't see it against Central Michigan. We saw, a little less than 5 yards per carry on 26 rushing attempts. Problem is, you drill down on that a little bit. You get a little bit closer to the actual numbers, and you take out Eli Holstein having 36 yards on 4 rushing attempts. 3 of those were actual runs, or scrambles. One of them was a sack for -4 yards. But you take that off, and Pitt's running backs had 22 rushing attempts for 88 yards. That's 4 yards per carry. It's fine. But just fine. Just fine. And, in a lot of games, if it's an ACC game and you came out of it saying the rushing attack was just fine, you say, okay, well, that's probably good enough, But if you're coming out of the Central Michigan game and you're saying that was just fine, and that's right on the heels of the Duquesne game, and you say, well, it was barely fine. Aside from, Desmond Reed's long run, which it was interesting, just as a quick side note, I think it was Friday night was the Louisville James Madison game. It was like a 1-touchdown game late in the fourth quarter. Isaac Brown, the reigning ACC Offensive Rookie of the Year. Totally pedestrian stat line. It was like 12 carries for 37 yards or something like that. Like he had not had a huge impact, and then he busts like a 70-yard run. His final stat line looks great. His average yards per carry looked great, and it looks like he had a really productive day and dominated. But really, he just had one big run, which was kind of like Desmond Reed's game against Duquesne. Or at least on the rushing side. He obviously made a big impact on the punt return, on special teams with the long punt return touchdown. But it was kind of like his game against Duquesne, which was largely like Desmond Reed's game against Central Michigan, save for the big run. He had 10 carries for 46 yards, a long of 19. So he averaged, close to 5 yards per carry. Not bad, but I think, this week we're probably going to get into some of the things we got into last week when we were talking about the running game, that it's not just about yards per carry. It's about how many times did you get at least 4 yards? That's a win on a running play. If you can get 4 yards or more, how many times did you do that? And how many times were you held to 3 or less? And this is less about Desmond Reed and more about that offensive line, because I'm just not sold on their run blocking ability after 2 games. And that's a concern. Because if you weren't really getting blown away by how they were blowing teams off the ball against Duquesne and Central Michigan, you got to be at least a little bit concerned in how they're going to run block against West Virginia, Louisville, Boston College, Florida State, NC State, Syracuse, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Miami, and the rest, right? Like, if you couldn't do it against these 2 teams, how well are you going to run block when the level of competition increases, when it gets tougher out there? But you know what I'm doing? I'm doing the same thing that everybody should be doing about the Steelers from yesterday's game. And like focusing on the things that are like concerns rather than start with the top. They just beat a team by 4 touchdowns yesterday, or on Saturday, I should say. You got a 45-17 win. And the thing I talked about, and so let's start there. Let's start with positives, even though we've already sort of started with negatives and concerns. The thing I talked about a lot on the postgame show, and it was how I opened the postgame show. I wrote an article about it yesterday on Panther-Lair.com. It was the biggest thing that stood out to me from that game was how the team was able to sort of rally and take momentum back when momentum was slipping away. If you go from Eli Holstein's interception, which gave Central Michigan the ball. Where did they get it? Like the 13 or something like that. The 13-yard line. You go from that point with that interception, the Central Michigan touchdown that basically ended the first half, 2 punts to open the second half, one from each team, and then Central Michigan marches a long 63-yard drive for a touchdown to make it 24-17. And with about 3 minutes left to go in the third quarter, Pitt's only up by 7 points. That was a danger zone. They were in the danger zone right there. And I think everybody in the stadium knew it. I was getting text messages about it, like, look out, momentum's on Central Michigan's side, and it felt like it was. And I imagine, I don't know if on the sideline if they would say they lost the momentum, but I think they had to have known it. I think they had to have known that they were in a point where they needed to make some big plays. Chances are Pitt's defense would rebound and play well the rest of the way and keep Central Michigan from getting into the end zone again, but they just gave up an 11-play, 63-yard drive where Central Michigan converted 2 fourth downs. And so it was not a given and a foregone conclusion that the defense was going to bounce back and play well for the final 15 minutes or 18 minutes or whatever was left in the game. And the offense hadn't really done anything since before Eli Holstein's interception. So I think there was cause for concern. The game was getting a little too close for comfort. And then Pitt responded. And Kenny Johnson takes a kickoff 47 yards back to the Central Michigan 48. They try a running play with Desmond Reed. He gets 0 yards on 2nd and 10. Eli Holstein scrambles out of the pocket to his right, throws one deep to Raphael Williams, catches it, 48-yard touchdown, game over. Pitt scored 2 more times after that because that score made it, 31-17. And Pitt scored 2 more touchdowns. Juelz Goff had a rushing touchdown. Ja'Kirian Turner had his first career rushing touchdown. But the defense rebounded as well. They didn't allow Central Michigan to score again. And so everything sort of came into focus the way it needed to after that. But the ability to respond to that adversity, and this was something Pat Narduzzi talked about after the game on Saturday, that, the team did face a little bit of adversity, and he kind of like danced around it. He didn't want to come out and say, I was glad that we were in that spot, but I think he was a little bit glad because he wanted to see his team respond to adversity. He wanted to see his team have a little bit of pressure on them because there wasn't a lot of pressure in the Duquesne game. And up until that point, there really wasn't much pressure in the Central Michigan game. But now you're only up by a touchdown and you've got a quarter plus left to play. You should be feeling some pressure. You should be a little uncomfortable. How do you respond now when you're in that situation? And they responded with two of their biggest plays of the game: 47-yard kick return, 48-yard pass for a touchdown. That was Eli Holstein's fourth touchdown pass in the game, his second time in as many games this season that he's thrown 4 touchdown passes. He set a career high for touchdown passes against Duquesne with 4, and then he matched that with 4 against Central Michigan. I don't think he's going to throw 4 touchdowns every game, but he's off to a great start this season. He's completed more than 70% of his passes. He's thrown for more than 500 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Neither interception was very good. The first one was worse than the second one. The interception against Duquesne was really bad because he just wasn't seeing the field very well. The interception against Central Michigan, he's on the run, rolling out to his right. He sees a tight end, I think it was probably Justin Holmes, open, and tries to throw it to him, just doesn't realize that there's a linebacker standing between him and Holmes, and he throws it right to the linebacker. As he said, and he's right, if he puts it a little bit higher, a little more touch, he can float it over the linebacker, easy completion to Holmes for a first down, and maybe they never even get into that point of adversity of only being up by a touchdown late in the third quarter. Overall, with Eli Holstein, probably my biggest takeaway is that he's still better, or seems to make bigger plays and better plays when he's off script, right? Getting out of the pocket, scrambling, running around, making a play, rather than just when he drops back and there's not pressure and the pocket doesn't collapse and he actually has to pick the defense apart. Not saying he doesn't make some of those plays or he can't make some of those plays, because he can and he does, but he seems to do, maybe it's just the scramble plays, the broken plays stand out more and they get more oohs and ahs and they're more exciting to watch. And so maybe that's why it seems like he does that more or does that better when I think back on it anecdotally. He's not perfect. He's still got areas where he needs to improve. He still needs to make better decisions. I think even though he had the 2 interceptions, I think he had a few other throws that were pretty questionable decisions. I mean, his first pass of the season against Duquesne was nearly picked off on a pass that, in a pattern or type of pattern that he got intercepted a number of times last year. And so, I think Pro Football Focus has him with 3 turnover-worthy plays so far, and I think that counts the 2 that actually were turnovers. It feels like he probably is still putting the ball in jeopardy a little bit, but he's also spreading the ball around. They had a ton of guys catch passes on Saturday. They had a ton of guys catch passes against Duquesne. He's utilizing all of his playmakers. He's thrown 3 touchdowns to tight ends and to 3 different guys, and none of them is Jake Overman. He got Malachi Thomas last week in the Duquesne game. He got Justin Holmes and Josh Altman in the Central Michigan game. He's spreading the ball around. He threw 2 touchdowns to Blue Hicks in the first game. He threw 2 touchdowns to Raphael Williams in the second game. He's hit Kenny Johnson for a touchdown. I mean, he's doing a good job involving a lot of the players and involving a lot of the receivers. And I think when you're spreading the ball around like that and getting a lot of guys the ball, I think that's a testament to knowing the plays, knowing the reads and the progressions, and seeing the field. And so I think he's doing that. Look, I think there's been a lot more good than bad or even just concerning with Eli Holstein so far this season. Like everybody else, we're going to see how he does when the level of competition increases. But Eli Holstein looks good. I think he looks like he's about back to the level he was at when he was playing at a high level last season. Again, not perfect, but pretty good. And showing that potential that he's got to be a really, really good college quarterback. So it's fun to watch, and it's fun to watch when he runs. I mean, it's such a weapon when he runs. And he made some big runs on Saturday. He made a couple nice runs against Duquesne. He as I said, he had 36 rushing yards out of Pitt's 124. I mean, that's a significant chunk. I don't know what the percentage is there, but it's more than a quarter, right? More than 25% of Pitt's rushing yards against Central Michigan came from Eli Holstein, basically on 3 carries plus a sack. And so that's a huge weapon for him. It's a huge weapon for Pitt's offense. It's something they can call as a designed run or a draw, and it's also something he's got available to him when the play breaks down or he doesn't like what he sees or the pocket collapses and he needs to move around. He can pick up first downs, and he's got to be smart. You want him to protect himself, but he's making some pretty sensational plays out there with his legs. Really like what we've seen out of the receivers so far. I think the tight ends have played well. Also, I still don't know what the ceiling is, but it is funny. I said this on Saturday on the postgame show. I mean, the 2 position groups that I was probably the lowest on coming into this season were the receivers and the tight ends, and they have probably exceeded my expectations more than any other group on the team. I still don't know if the receivers are great or anything like that. But like Kenny Johnson's playing well. Raphael Williams had a huge game on Saturday. Blue Hicks had a huge game against Duquesne. Deuce Spann has had 2 good catches and run. I don't know how you would pluralize catch and run. 2 good yak situations, one in each game, where he made a catch and picked up a bunch of yards after the catch. And so that's good to see as well. I mean, I think those guys are playing well. I've got concerns about the offensive line. I don't think the run blocking has been very good. I think the pass blocking has been better, but I also think Eli Holstein is covering up for some of that. I think a less mobile quarterback would have been sacked in some of these situations where he's been able to escape and get outside the pocket and make plays and either run for first downs or make throws on the run. Defensively, they've given up 77 net rushing yards in 2 games. Like, you can't really argue with that. And they've given up 26 points in 2 games. I mean, that's if you're allowing 38 rushing yards and 13 points per game, you're playing at a pretty high level. They had 11 tackles for loss and 4 sacks against Central Michigan. They haven't really gotten takeaways. They got credited with 1. Francis Brew, I think it was like a 4th down. It looked like it was more of an incomplete pass, but I think Francis Brew was credited with the forced fumble, and Kyle Lewis had the fumble recovery, but it's their 1 takeaway of the season so far. You would like to have seen them do more, but there were going to be limited opportunities for takeaways against Central Michigan anyway, given how run-heavy they were. So I'm not excusing it. You need more takeaways, but I think those are going to come. I think you also need more rotation. They hardly rotated the linebackers at all. They really didn't rotate the linebackers at all until the very end of the game. They didn't rotate the safeties at all until the very end of the game. They were kind of stuck with just 2 corners. Technically, they're number 3 and number 4 corners when Rashad Battle didn't play and Tamon Lynham left the game early with an injury against Central Michigan. Now, that Shadarian Harrison and Sean Lee did fine. But again, that was against a run-heavy offense. When they face a team that's going to throw more, that's going to be a big concern. As a matter of fact, tomorrow when we do, or maybe Wednesday, we do 5 questions for the week. That's going to be one of the big questions, one of the big storylines this week is, I mean, first of all, what's the cornerback availability look like? And if you have to go with Harrison and Lee again, which I think those guys are going to play a lot, regardless of who's back, how do they do against more pass-happy, pass-effective offenses that they're going to face? I think the defensive line, some flashes there. Zach Crothers has flashed for sure. Jimmy Scott's getting into the backfield, but not really finishing plays. I think the defensive tackles have been making a positive impact. Isaiah Neal had a really good game against Central Michigan. Francis Brew had a good game against Central Michigan. I think those guys are making an impact up front. Obviously, the starting 3 linebackers, I think, have been really, really good. Rasheem Biles had 11 tackles against Central Michigan. It's going to be a different kind of beast as you move forward into these Power 4 games where teams can actually throw the ball, not just rely on the run all the time. But for now, I think Pitt's defense has passed every test. They give up a few 4th down conversions, but at least one of them was just a ridiculously good catch. The coverage was fine, the pressure was fine, and the receiver just made an outstanding catch. And sometimes that's going to happen. It happened to Pitt twice on Saturday, actually. Central Michigan, for a team that's so run-heavy, their receivers, there were 2 times I could think of. That 4th down I'm mentioning on their touchdown drive, I think it was the second 4th down they converted on that touchdown drive, and then a 3rd down they converted on their field goal drive in the first half. Just outstanding catches. Just high degree of difficulty catches, which shout out to those guys for being wide receivers on a run-first team. Or a team that runs as much as Central Michigan does, and they're able to go out and still make big plays. But overall, I think Pitt's defense has passed all the tests so far. I think the special teams have passed all the tests so far. Trey Bukowski made that 43-yard field goal on Saturday, career high, obviously, for him. He's now 3 of 3 on field goals, 12 of 13 or something like that on extra points because he had the one miss in the Duquesne game. But he's been fine. Caleb Junko's punting well, and their return units. The return units are really good. Kenny Johnson and Desmond Reed are a major threat, and other teams are going to have to be very concerned about that. And we'll see how that manifests, either in those guys getting big returns for great field position and or touchdowns, or teams kicking away from them, which will benefit Pitt in the field position department. So either way, Panthers are 2-0. And now they have the backyard brawl coming up. We are going to have a ton to talk about today. Don't forget, we'll have the Pat Narduzzi press conference today. He'll talk at noon. We'll have a video posted shortly after that, and we'll recap everything Narduzzi said in tomorrow's Morning Pitt. So Pitt's 2-0. It's a good start to the season. Hopefully you enjoyed your weekend, enjoyed the Steeler game, your fantasy football, whatever it is you did over the weekend. I hope you had a good one. Enjoy your Monday. Hope your week gets off to a great start. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow on the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.